The weekend is here and it's still June, which means multiple recruits will be in Tuscaloosa on this weekend. Some have already arrived in Tuscaloosa by the time this episode of Process is posted on our YouTube channel. As always, I'm Justin Smith, the Director of Recruiting Managing Editor here at Touchdown Alabama. Be sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button as well. Subscribe to the notification bell, be notified when we drop content on our YouTube channel. On today's episode, I will talk about multiple recruits who will be in Tuscaloosa throughout the weekend for official visits, including multiple guys who are committed elsewhere at the moment. I'll also talk about some recruits who the Crimson Tide recently extended offers to. Multiple of those prospects are recruits in the 2026 recruiting class. So we're going to start off by talking about those guys. One of those guys is a quarterback. Four-star quarterback Taden Evan Ka'awa recently got extended an offer by the Crimson Tide. We have talked about this on multiple episodes of the process. Now, Alabama wants a 2026 quarterback, and that is no secret. They recently offered Jet Tamala and Matt Ponatowski. Got both of those guys on campus as well. But after getting both of those guys on campus, they extended an offer to the four-star quarterback out of Utah. Now, from a recruiting perspective, I think this kind of paints a picture that they don't feel super confident. I'm talking about Alabama, about the quarterbacks that they have offered and they are currently recruiting. At least that's kind of like what it screams. You can take a look at it from a recruiting perspective and look as if they want to shoot a wide range net here a little bit, extend their list of guys they're going after at that quarterback position. And you take a look at the four-star quarterback they recently offered now in Taden Evan Ka'awa. There's a lot to like about his potential. Can make a lot of different throws. You see him be able to maneuver around the pocket, keep his eyes downfield. He's a 6'4" quarterback. But like Ka'awa, I put Jet Tamala, I put Matt Ponatowski in this conversation as well. These are not guys, at least at this particular point of their development, looked at as transcendent type of quarterbacks. Guys who are going to just demand playing time immediately when they step onto the campus of their choice. In my mind, in my opinion, I think that kind of fits well into what Alabama is looking for in the 2026 quarterback, because they have Keelan Russell, of course, but they want to bring in a guy who possibly is going to have a couple of years where he needs to develop and it could still be a good quarterback at the next level. And I think Awa kind of fits into that conversation, but we'll continue to see how things develop. But right now we know the Crimson Tide really want a 2026 quarterback. And we've talked about the multiple reasons why they want to sign a guy here, because it's kind of like a safety valve, because there's so many ways that Alabama's quarterback room could look after this 2025 football season wraps up. Another 2026 recruit who recently got an offer from the Crimson Tide is Zay Hall, a 2026 linebacker out of Hillcrest, Tuscaloosa, in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. So the Crimson Tide are not only recruiting an in-state kid, they're recruiting an in-town kid, a guy who recently got on campus for a camp, a 707 camp actually, where Alabama hosted some high schools who were able to get on campus and play 707 football, continue their summer workout programs and trying to get better as a unit. But Hall is the guy who stood out, actually ran a 4.5 40 while he was on campus. So if you're 6'3", 220 pounds and you run a 4.5 40 and play sideline to sideline like Hall is able to do, you're going to be a guy who can earn an offer from the Tide, an opportunity to catch up with them. After that offer, he said that this offer is going to have a big impact on his recruitment, saying how much he loved the Alabama football program, feels that there's nothing lacking about the program, feels it's one of the best programs ever, actually set to officially visit Alabama on next weekend. So the Crimson Tide have an opportunity to shoot up Hall's recruitment very quickly. So he's a guy that Alabama fans are going to want to know about and know about fairly quickly. Another 2026 defensive back who recently got an offer from the Crimson Tide is Rael Kelly out of Winton Woods High School in Ohio. The Crimson Tide have been really successful recruiting this high school in recent recruiting classes. Of course, they signed Justin Hill, the outside linebacker who's playing the Wolf linebacker position for the Crimson Tide as a freshman. He's a product of Winton Woods High School in Ohio, although the Tide didn't get this next guy from Winton Woods. He did go to Winton Woods, but the Crimson Tide got him via the transfer portal in Cam Calhoun after he transferred from Utah to Alabama after the end of the 2024 football season. You take a look at Kelly, 6'3", 180 pounds. We consider that frame. That frame kind of reminds you of more so as a cornerback in his modern age of college football. But he's a guy who roams around Winton Woods back end of that defense really well. A guy who's not afraid to come down and make contact, although he's a smaller frame type of kid. So he will come down and help in run support, but jumps passes really well, gets into passing lanes really well. With that length, you're able to do a lot. And the Crimson Tide continue to show that they want these long defensive backs in that Kane Womack 4.25 defense. But Kelly is currently verbally committed to Rutgers, actually committed to them a couple of days before Alabama extended this offer to him. So we'll see how things continue to roll, because the Crimson Tide are eyeing multiple flip targets at the moment. So you can add Kelly to that board, along with some of these guys that we're going to talk about a little bit later in this episode of the process. But now we're going to transition into the guys who will be on campus for official visits on this weekend, starting with Brandon Arrington, 5-star athlete out of Mount Miguel High School in California. Easily one of the top athletes in the country. I think if you just went into a lab and created your perfect cornerback in today's age of college football, you're going to come out with a guy like Brandon Arrington, a guy who's 6'3", a long cornerback who is athletic and is a true speedster. When I say this guy's a speedster, he is an elite type of talent on the track. Has a PR of 10-1 in the 100-meter dash, and that transitions over to the football field, which is why he was considered a prospect early on, who could be a wide receiver or cornerback at the next level. But the Crimson Tide like him at defensive back, and I think he's going to be one of those guys. A lot of times you're going to see this. I think a lot of people say this about Travis Hunter as well. He's one of those guys who, in my opinion, he just can possibly be a transcendent type of cornerback with that type of length, with that type of speed, with that type of playmaking ability. I think he'd be a really good wide receiver, but wide receiver position where we see so many good and elite guys with elite speed at that position. A lot of times they don't play that cornerback role. So I think Arrington kind of like fits into that conversation. He's the guy the Crimson Tide have been recruiting for so long, a long time here in this 2026 recruiting cycle. Have gotten out to California multiple times to see him. He's gotten to Tuscaloosa as well. One time he spoke so highly of just Alabama football and the Tuscaloosa environment and just the culture around Alabama football, telling me that everything about Alabama fits him. Just the culture, the town, everything about the university fits him. So he said that early on in this recruitment, and he continues to be a guy who the Tide likes, and he seems to be really interested in Alabama. Has a July commitment date locked in, so the Crimson Tide are still, at least at this point, in the mix for him. He's down to Alabama, Oregon, Penn State, Texas A&M, Washington, and USC. Alabama, like I said, he's a guy who they have continued to recruit, and I think at least in terms of this official visit weekend, they have an opportunity to take a step forward with them, although programs like Oregon are still involved, so we'll see how that continues to develop. Elijah Golden will also be in Tuscaloosa. Visited Alabama 2 times during the spring on unofficial visits, and I think Alabama picked up a lot of momentum during the spring. So I think this weekend they have an opportunity to really capitalize on that momentum on an official visit. He seems to really thinks that he fits well into this Alabama defense in terms of how he plays and kind of like what he brings to the table, telling me that he feels the Alabama defense is very versatile. I am a versatile defensive lineman. That would definitely be a good fit for me because I can play 3 tech sometimes. Those all depends on the situation. I'm very versatile. I can go at any position on defensive line and dominate no matter where I am at. And that's kind of like the perfect description for a lot of guys who are on Alabama's roster right now, like a Jordan Renaud, like a James Smith, like a LT Overton. All of those guys probably can play every spot along the Crimson Tide's defensive front. So Golden, at least from that standpoint, thinks that he can fit right in with the Crimson Tide. When you take a look at his film, he kind of like does that. You see him play nose guard right down there, Pacific play, turn and run really well. You don't see a lot of great. It's kind of like what you kind of like see. We kind of separate high school defensive linemen from major defensive line prospects when they're able to turn and run. So he plays nose tackle here at his school in Florida at the moment. He's going to be lined up at just different positions along that defensive front, specifically more so in the interior of their defensive line. He shows the ability to have active hands at times, and he's a physical defensive lineman as well. So the Crimson Tide, I feel like, are in a really good position after hosting him 2 times during the spring. This summer, I think they get this summer and this weekend, I think they get an opportunity to capitalize on the momentum that they have built with Golden. Nick Abrams will also be in Tuscaloosa, a long linebacker who kind of fits what we're just going to continue to talk about when we talk about these linebackers. They're athletic. You need athletic linebackers in today's age of college football, and Abrams fits right into that conversation. He's a guy who's a patient linebacker, diagnosis plays really well. When he diagnoses where a play is going in terms of him shooting a gap and getting to the football with good closing speed, I think he does that really well. You got to play sideline if you're going to be a great linebacker in today's age. If not, you're just not going to be a college football prospect. It is as simple as that. Abrams is a guy who actually has the Crimson Tide among his finalists at the moment. Alabama has been recruiting him for a long time as well now, but he's down to Alabama, Georgia, Michigan, and Oregon. Had an opportunity to talk with them ahead of this official visit. This way he told me he was looking forward to seeing, really getting to spend time with the players, seeing the people I will be around, and getting to know them as well. I'll also be looking at whether I will still be interested in Alabama if football was not in the picture. Another big thing is me envisioning myself at the school and in the environment. Can I thrive there and become an even better version of myself? So I think this weekend is more important than football for Abrams. He'll be looking at just what Alabama has to provide its athletes outside of football. So we'll continue to see how that moves forward and where Alabama stands for Abrams after this official visit. I think this is one of those visits similar to Arrington where Alabama can really just capitalize on the momentum that they have built and the relationship they have built with these guys and possibly create some separation and possibly, never know, Alabama has done in the past, jump out in front for these guys. But we will see how things develop. Roman Voss is a 4-star athlete who is down at Alabama and Minnesota. The Crimson Tide like him at tight end, but he plays a little bit everywhere for his high school at the moment. Quarterback, tight end, wide receiver, defensive back, linebacker. He plays everywhere. When I say he plays everywhere for his high school in Minnesota. But he's down at Alabama in the home state program of Minnesota. The Crimson Tide, I think they have an opportunity to create some separation from themselves in Minnesota. This kind of has to be the priority for them. Voss is a 6'4", 215-pound guy who, when you take a look at his film, you kind of like to see why he could easily transition over to tight end because of the physicality that he shows when he sometimes plays on defense, can be lined up out wide and doesn't look out of place. Not the greatest route runner, of course, but he's a guy who is going to continue to grow in that area as a tight end. So I think he's a guy who Alabama football really likes. I think one of the things that stands out to me is kind of like what we saw in that last play, his ability to work with the football in his hands. So I think that's going to be something that benefits him at the next level, no matter where he ends up. But the Crimson Tide are in the mix with him. Like I say, he's down Alabama and Minnesota. We'll see which school gets the 4-star athlete in the future. Javon Mallerie is one of the guys who are committed elsewhere who will be in Tuscaloosa. He's currently committed to Miami at the moment. The Florida product is an explosive running back. The Crimson Tide have a lot of running backs, not a lot of running backs, but a good group of running backs on their board who they are fairly interested in. Mallerie is in that conversation. Xavier Crowell, Derek Cooper, who they hosted last weekend for an official visit. Ryan Estrada is also in that conversation. We talked about him on a recent episode of The Process, but Mallerie is as well. A lot of these guys are verbally committed elsewhere. I'm going to talk about 3 in a row here before we end this episode of The Process. I think these are good opportunities for the Crimson Tide to possibly get in a position where they could execute the flip really quickly, or they could plant the seed of the flip in the future, because I've seen both sides of it, and it's kind of like how flips happen. They typically happen like right after the visit, or they just plant the seed and time goes on, and a lot of things happen during the football season. And this typically are like more so close to signing day. That's kind of like when the flip is executed, but like the seed most likely had been planted for a very long time. So I'll keep that in mind with a lot of these guys who are committed elsewhere who will be in Tuscaloosa on this weekend. But Mallerie, like I said, will be in Tuscaloosa. Miami commit. Alabama's coaching staff got out to visit him. Robbie Gillespie and Courtney Morgan a couple of weeks ago. So Alabama really seems interested in the 4-star running back. Cameron Mayok is also a athlete who's committed elsewhere. He's committed to Florida State at the moment. The Crimson Tide like this kid at the linebacker position in terms of what he brings to the table, and kind of like some of the things that stand out about Mayok at the moment. He's a 6'2", 210-pound athletic defender with the potential to be a linebacker or defensive back at the next level. Just take a look at his frame. He's not a guy who's this huge, bulky type of linebacker. He's a guy who has the potential, just based on the way that he's moved, hip fluidity, the way that he's able to flow around the football. It's kind of like why you say, he has the potential to be either a linebacker or safety at the next level. Displays great closing speed and also just excel at playing in space and making effective tackles, which goes back to what I was saying. He kind of could be a guy who could be a linebacker or safety at the next level. But verbally committed to Florida State, confirmed to me earlier that he will be in Tuscaloosa on this weekend. So I think he's a guy that fits right into that conversation with Mallerie. And so will the next guy talk about is Alabama possibly just planting the seed, getting these guys say, hey, come to Tuscaloosa and get a look. We really like you. We know you're committed elsewhere, but hey, we want you to be a part of our 2026 recruiting class. Get on campus and see see what we can provide and see if you possibly want to reevaluate your decision. He's a guy, Karen Mayok, before I leave him, he's a guy actually who's going to make a final decision on July 7th, although he's verbally committed to Florida State. Aiden Terry is another guy who's verbally committed elsewhere, who's been in Tuscaloosa, committed to Georgia Tech at the moment. He's a 4-star defensive back out of Georgia, long defensive back, similar to a guy like Kelly. Got that similar frame. Like I said, Kelly just looks like a cornerback. But when you talk about this next kid, he's a guy who could be a cornerback at the next level, most likely going to be a cornerback at the next level as well. When you talk about Aiden Terry and kind of like what he brings to the table, you're talking about 6'3" defensive back, has that length. College coach are in high pursuit of at the cornerback position. He does a great job on the back end when able to use his strength. That will do it for this episode of The Process. Thank you guys so much for joining me today on our YouTube channel. As always, I am Justin Smith, the Director of Critic Managing Editor here at Touchdown Alabama. Be sure to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button as well. Subscribe to the notification bell. Be notified when we drop content on our YouTube channel.